Thank you all for joining us. My name is Christy Wandering. I'm the Director of Programming for Madeline Island School of the Arts, and today I'm joined by our Associate Director of Programming, Maddie Rupp. Hello. We will both be here to guide you today, and we want to thank you for joining us online with Paula. She is the reason we are all here, and we couldn't be more grateful to be working with her today and in her upcoming retreat. We'd like to give Paula a brief introduction and introduce our school before we hand it over to Paula. So if at any time at all you have any questions, please drop them in the Q&A section and we will answer them at the end of Paula's presentation. For those of you that may not know Paula, Paula Kovarik creates art with stitch and fabric, transforming intuitive line work into meditative, detailed pieces. Her award-winning FiberArt has been recognized by Quilt National, Quilts Art Quilts, World of Thread, FiberArt Now, featured in American Craft and FiberArt Now magazine. Her work appears in Art Quilts Unfolding, 50 Years of Innovation, and Art Quilts International, Abstract and Geometric. Paula teaches workshops and authored the book At Play in the Garden of Stitch, and her work is in the International Quilt Museum, the Memphis International Airport, and many private collections. Paula lives and works in Memphis, Tennessee. I could go on and on. I'm sure I've missed a few, Paula, but I think that scratches the surface, I hope. And sure. Paula is joining us August 26th of this year for her signature class At Play in the Garden of Stitch workshop. Welcome, Paula. Thanks for joining.
Thank you. Thank you so much. That was kind of overwhelming. I appreciate it.
We were trying to, there was so much. There was even more to include, but hopefully that, like I said, scratches the surface. We were hoping that everyone would just humor us for a little bit of time. We want to share a little bit about our campus and about Madeline Island School of the Arts. Take a few minutes just to tell you about the history of MISA, which stands for Madeline Island School of the Arts, and our current workshops. If anyone's wondering where in the world is Madeline Island School of the Arts, this is where we started. We're the largest and inhabited of the 22 Apostle Islands. So you see that little red spot on there, that is Madeline Island, and the green islands around there are the Apostle Islands. Our school has been in operation for 12 years. This is a beautiful picture of our campus. It's considered to be one of the top ranked art schools in the country. The privately owned 40-acre campus is an hour and a half from Duluth Airport, and it's a quick ferry ride, as you can see from that ferry picture, across beautiful Lake Superior. And once you arrive on the island, it officially begins island time.
Christy?
Yes?
I'm not seeing the images on my screen here.
Are we sharing?
It says loading. A number of people in the chat are also saying they have a blank screen.
We gotta get that fixed then.
Okay, there we go.
Do you see them?
Yeah, now I see it.
Okay, well, let's go through where we are real quick, if you don't mind. Now we're starting from the beginning. There's our campus. It's an aerial view. The map before there, you may not have seen where we're located. We are in Northwest Wisconsin, and we are a short ferry ride over from Bayfield. That's the harbor town before you head over to the island. We're one of 22 Apostle Islands, and it's that ferry boat ride that you may have missed. But thanks, Paula, for letting us know. We could have been very long-winded there without any pictures. That would have been really boring. So, but you take that ferry across and you arrive on our beautiful 40-acre campus, which is what hopefully everyone is seeing there. Straight back on that picture, you'll see those north-facing spacious studios. And then in the barn, you'll have our large dining facilities as well. So we share meals together. We have sprawling meadows and, of course, Lake Superior hikes, beaches, lovely lagoons. The island is known for its parks and access to the beaches. So it's plenty to do in your off time. Our season here on Madeline Island is relatively short. We run from June until the end of September, being in the Midwest, and then we follow the sun and we move over in January to Tucson to extend our workshop season and provide more diverse settings. So we have 3 other locations, and we're close to announcing our 4th location, which we'll talk about. So we spend the winter at the luxurious dude ranch outside of Tucson, Arizona, and it's called Tanca Verde Guest Ranch. They've got 80 horses on that campus. They have famous cowboy cookouts and sweeping views of the Rincon Mountains. We're right backing up to Saguaro National Park. So it's a beautiful location for us in the Midwest that want to escape the winters to come and enjoy Tucson, Arizona, and a little sun. In March, we head to downtown Santa Fe. We're just a few blocks from the historic plaza. And Santa Fe is a wonderful place for all the endless, amazing restaurants to try dinners. They're known as an art capital with local museums, featuring the Folk Art Museum, Georgia O'Keeffe Museums. We even take trips out to the Ghost Ranch, the land of just absolutely Georgia O'Keeffe land, obviously. In the fall, we move over to Bar Harbor, Maine, and this location you can see we're oceanfront accommodations, really well lit workshop space there as well. Crisp air, vibrant foliage, and lots of fresh lobster and seafood. And that's our Bar Harbor location. And we're really excited to announce that we'll be adding our 5th location in the fall of 2025 on the Monterey Peninsula. So we're heading to California at the Sillamar Conference Center. This location is a beautiful refuge by the Pacific Ocean, beautiful walkways along the beach, and breathtaking sunsets. So we hope all of you will consider visiting us at one of our 4, almost 5 locations, taking in that full MISA experience. And I'm gonna thank you guys for your time and just letting us showcase our workshop space and our different campuses. And I'll sign off and hand it over to Paula.
Oh, thank you so much. And, I just want to go to every single one of those.
I know. I hope you do. We'd love to have you in all of them.
I'm going to share my screen and talk about my journey as well as what your journey at the class might be if you take this class. I noticed a number of people as everybody was joining, I noticed a number of people who have taken the class, and I appreciate you coming to this webinar. The wonderful value of being a teacher is that you make friends with the people that you're teaching with every single time you go out. And I feel so blessed by so many wonderful, skilled artists and quilters in this little mini career that I've accomplished here. So thank you for coming. Let me share my screen and I'll bring up this this PowerPoint. Let me see if I can get it to go. Everybody see the images? Is there any problem? Can you see my screen? Christy?
Yes, I can see it great. Yes.
Okay. So I'm going to talk about At Play in the Garden of Stitch, but I really want to focus on the subtitle here is that this is about fearless free motion stitching. I know a lot of people are somewhat intimidated by free motion stitching, and there are so many incredibly talented free motion stitchers out there that it's hard to not compare yourself to others. But I was introduced to this medium by my mother back about 20 years ago. When she was in her 80s, she decided she wanted to learn how to quilt. So she took a class, and she was just a pistol. She'd do anything. She was fearless about everything, and instilled that fearlessness in us as children. We should go try stuff. So when she came back from her class, she said, well, you really have to try this because I think you would love it. And I thought she was crazy. It was one of those things like, yeah, mom, bed quilts, something that you put on your bed that you sleep under, baby quilts, maybe for gifts, but it's kind of boring. And it's not something that I was really in touch with. I was at a point as a graphic designer that I was kind of rigid in the way I was thinking. My business was primary. I'd spent a lot of time making other people happy in my business. I had a very crowded schedule all the time. And I think I thrived on stress, but I was looking for a roadmap out of that. So, moms are always right. This is how I felt before starting to quilt. I do a lot of drawings that are just kind of subconscious drawings. I'm not a great drawer. I can't draw realistically, I should say, but I do doodle with the best of them. And I try to, when I'm doing drawings, kind of just let it go, not have any expectations of what I'm trying to communicate or draw. And when this one came out, I thought, oh, yeah, that's how I feel. It's kind of overload. I just really had to, there was a little chaos in my life that I probably shouldn't have. So I went back to mom and I said, I'm going to try this quilting stuff. And, you know, I can't repeat squares. That's a handicap. I can't repeat squares. When I do repeat squares, I get so bored I can't move forward. So I end up with all these UFOs under my table. But then I realized that, well, I can make squares, but what if I broke them apart? What if I kind of played with using squares as an item that is repeated, but then break up the surface so that they are floating? And that sort of gave me the first instinct that I could really think about quilting in a different way, that I didn't have to make quilts like everybody else was making. I could use some of my doodles and drawings and thoughts to create work that is more about me. And that was kind of revelatory. The other thing that it did was, when you're in front of a sewing machine and you've got fabric that you're stitching, there is a meditation in that. There's a quietness in that. You're watching that needle go up and down, up and down, up and down. And I found that to be healing. It was one of those things where I could release some of the stress that I had in my life and I could just go play. So, playing is, primary in my focus, but secondary is how can I tell stories? How can I tell some of the things that I'm thinking about? These pieces are indicative of that, where the one on the right was generated by the fact that one of my girlfriends was really bad at choosing men, and just always found the wrong one. And I thought, I really kind of thought about the trajectory, not sure what happened there. There's a beep. But and then the other one on the left here is all about the environment and all of the chaos and craziness that we're going around in this world. That one was actually collected by the International Quilt Museum. But this is one of the things that when I talk about meditation, this stitching is something that I go to often, where I'm stitching one line at a time. And it just keeps moving instead of stopping and starting. So this line that you see creating all these little characters is one line that has traveled across the surface of the quilt. And because of the fact that it's traveling and going around objects that are already there, I'm in a reactive mode. I'm thinking in terms of what's next. And oh, here's a barrier. How do I succumb the barrier? How do I build this composition with stitch? And I'm also thinking about the fact that stitch is a separate layer of the quilt that you're working on, that it's something that can add information, can add confusion, can add chaos, but also can add something of texture and drama in your work. I explored some 3D figures for quite a while during the COVID years, and these were done with quilts that I had finished and then repurposed into these beast-like forms. That was a lot of fun. And I think that's one thing that, looking at this medium, it's not so much that we're making 2D art quilts, which, as a side, I really hate the word art quilt, but we're creating 2D art, and why can't it be 3D? Why can't it ripple across the floor? Why can't it fall off of a table? those are the kind of questions I'm asking myself all the time nowadays, that, art can change, and the medium is not necessarily it can be in a different form. It can move or morph into different forms. Lately, I've been doing work like this, where I'm taking canvas and spraying ink on it kind of randomly, not thinking in terms of composition, just kind of throwing ink at a piece of canvas, with the challenge to myself of making a composition that will bring those ink blots together. Again, one of those things that I'm always searching for is this reactionary mode, the process of reacting to what's in front of me, the process of seeing and then creating from that thought. I think it's really important as an artist to be conscious of what you see at every moment of every day and into the night, because dreams can give you a lot too. Because all of those things can become elements in your artwork. All of those little bitty things that you see crawling across the floor, or the ceiling tiles, or the sign at the grocery store. All of those things can give you ideas for elements to stitch. I'm really concerned, I'm really looking at now how stitch can create layers in a piece, and how stitch can change the surface of a quilt so that it emerges out of a quilt. So these two exercises are something that I do often as practice, to see how defining space with stitch can actually change the story of the piece. I'm also looking at how I can interpret the ideas that I have into stitch. So this is another what if exercise. What if I had separate little elements that spoke to my dreams, and then how do I put them together with stitch and make them work? And so they're little games that I play with myself, really. I might be inspired by a cartoon I see, or the cracks in a sidewalk. Just lots of different ways of being inspired to try something with stitch. We do an exercise called fence posts, and this image on the right is indicative of that exercise, where you go up and down, up and down, up and down, reacting to the previous post that you created. And then, on the left, some of the drawings that I've done of what could be fence posts. How could I morph my simple fence post into something crazy and wild and fun? So, I've done a number of fence post exercises that look like the one that's on the left there, just because it's so much fun. And I'll challenge people to try that. It's just, it's really simple. Echoing and doodling are another tool part of the toolkit. Echoing, of course, is pretty simple. You just follow the line that you've already put down and grow it, kind of like those seismic, or what do they call those things? Isometric lines on maps, where you can see the terrain of a surface. Those are really handy in quilting. You can create texture that can represent water or land, or aerial views of things. And then doodling is just my go-to. I doodle all the time. So some of my doodles end up looking like Rube Goldberg devices, things that, if you had a soundtrack, it would sound kind of like a calliope. I'm also thinking about, one day I will have sound in my quilts, and one day I will have cameras in my quilts, so that when people come up to it, I'll be able to see their reaction to it. That's my warning for the future. But I'm also looking at the fact that quilts have texture, and we can manipulate that as artists. This is bas relief in its best form. It's soft and touchable. Even a baby quilt can be so much fun when you add another layer of batting in certain areas, or you stuff that batting from behind and create something that sort of nubs out, so that the baby can actually touch it and move his hand or her hand across it. So I'm looking at relief, texture, the ways that if you stitch more, it pushes the quilt back. If you stitch less, the negative space can come forward. So class exercises, I wanted to show you just generally some of the simple exercises that we will do in class. And these are some samples that I've created, but I want to also show you some of my students' work because I'm so proud of them. These are pieces that were made in one of the classes that I taught. These are actually representative of several different classes. You'll see on the bottom right-hand corner of the screen, there's a gallery. And that's usually what happens when we do this class after 5 days. The entire wall is covered with student work that actually just wows everybody who walks in the door because it's so fun and loose and crazy and experimental and awful and wonderful. And it's just so much fun. And we all have great fun working together and talking about the work together. So looking again back at the things that I'm looking at in my work, we work with scale and we work with the ideas of grids and how grids can organize your space. Let's see, let's get back to where I am. We work with one-line designs where you never let your needle stop. You just keep stitching and stitching and stitching. These two were done like that, where as you stitch, you create bumps and jiggles. And then when you come back to that bump and jiggle, you have to kind of react to it and get around it and keep moving. So some of those exercises this is the ultimate meditative practice. Just keep stitching, keep moving, and react to what you've already put down. You can create characters and landscapes with stitch, simple stories like this wonderful cat and a beautiful cliffside graphic with the sky in the background. It's just really wonderfully graphic and interesting to use stitch in a way that is surprising to a lot of people. We talk about negative space and creating heroes and how sometimes when you don't stitch an area, it's more important than the areas where you did stitch. That creating a center of interest by using negative space as an option is a really important tool. We talk about scale and backgrounds. This one on the left here, that's wonderfully loop-de-loop thing that, all of a sudden there's a great big loop-de-loop and how wonderful that is, how it balances the more detail on the left. And then this wonderful little fish that is very representational, sort of enmeshed in this chaotic kind of background, which could be interpreted as the deep sea. Wonderful ideas about how to use scale and backgrounds. Backgrounds also, of course, create texture. So as you can see in these two samples here that, the places where you're not stitching come forward, and the background stitching can create a ripply texture, can create a nubbly texture. You can do repeating circles and have lots of different round circles pop up on your quilt, which is a lot of fun. We also talk about combining line qualities and how if you are stitching in one way during a session and then morph it when you hit a certain object, it can change and be used as a compositional element. And also when you stitch one type of stitch, like on this one on the right, which has sort of rectilinear shapes that then kind of collapse into a chaotic kind of scribble, there's a really wonderful sense of energy there and movement. And those are the things that I'm really looking at when I'm creating quilts as art. I'm looking at ways to communicate my emotions, my thoughts about what's important, to establish a mood when you come up to the quilt. I talk to my students often about the 3 stages of looking at a quilt. When you look at a quilt from afar, you see the color and the shapes of the patchwork design. And then you get into a middle distance and you start realizing that there's more information and more texture than you expected. And then when you get up close, you get to see these little stitches. And that's where I see people coming up to my work and putting their nose 1 inch away to look at the detail that I've added to the piece. Here's some fence posts from students. I love the way that these fence posts have been filled in with different kinds of textures. And this one on the left, also that there's not a repeat element, but you can still see the gridded vertical shapes of the posts going up and down. So I have a website, and as part of that website, I have galleries, but also this journal page. And I use this journal page as a dialogue with myself. I find that if I say something out loud in public, it's often something that I have to commit to. I can't really go back on what I was thinking. I might change it a little, but I also have to recognize that I was certain about that particular idea at that particular time. So when I create these essays, I'm talking about works in progress and the thoughts that I have as an artist while I'm working, but then I oftentimes follow it up with the final piece that is created, so that you can see a process going through from one stage to the next. And some of that is really, like I said, a commitment to myself, but also handy for other people who are working through works that go through stages. We all work on stage by stage when we start with an idea, and it can morph into something different. So I have an Instagram feed that you can go to Instagram for. And then if you want to receive the essays that I write on my journal, you can subscribe by giving me your email. And every so often you'll get an email from me with my latest essay. Sometimes it's like 2 months away, and sometimes you might get one next week. It just sort of depends on how much teaching I'm doing or how many ideas I really have. I even talk about those failures that are so apparent when you're working. And those are the ones that teach me more than the successes. So my Instagram handle is at Yellow Brick Studio. My website, paulakovarik.com, and you can email me at paula@sogray.com. My book is called At Play in the Garden of Stitch, and there's a lot of student work in there, as well as some of my thoughts. The sort of the bottom line for everything that I write about is it's process, not product. My efforts as an artist is to be in process, just to be learning, to be continuing through the process of making art and creating those what ifs for myself, so that I can progress and learn from what I'm doing. And the products are sort of the end result, not something that I'm really concerned about. It's great when I see one of my pieces travel, because I feel like a piece is not done until the public has seen it. And then it's on its own, it's traveling its own journey. So I want to thank you all for this wonderful opportunity, and I hope to see some of you in Madeline Island. I'm really excited about going up to the Lake Superior. Such an amazing place. It looks like I could just move right in. And not to speak lightly of the other places too. So thank you for your time. Thank you for your ideas. Please ask me questions, because I love questions. Ask me more.
We already have some, Paula.
Okay.
Thank you for that amazing slideshow. That was, wow. I mean, I don't even know what to say. It was absolutely stunning and so beautiful to see all of your work laid out like that, and to see so many different designs. And I know a lot of people are intimidated by this free motion stitching, and there's maybe a lot of people that don't have that experience in that's free motion stitching. Would they be able to attend your workshop without that experience?
Absolutely. I've had students who have never turned on a sewing machine before. There are people who have tried free motion stitching and felt intimidated by it. It is intimidating when you see these professional and computer generated stitching going on, where everything is just so perfect. And, I encourage the wobble. I encourage the scribble. I encourage making messes. I feel like that's where we find discovery. That's where we find comfort. So, our first exercise in every class is make a mess. And I hope that everybody just goes along with me, because after you get through the mess part and you start seeing some of the possibilities in your work, It's just so exciting. So please don't hesitate.
You have a way of making messes look really, really beautiful. So I think there's a lot of people that would want to learn from that. Deborah had a question. She was wondering what type of batting you use.
Right now, I'm working with canvas, so I'm using a very heavy bat. I'm using wool batting because it has a good loft. But sometimes I'll even layer that up, cotton and wool together, to get even more texture on the front of the piece. Most of the time, when I'm using just a plain like cotton patchwork, I'll use cotton batting and cotton thread. I like to use a heavier thread because I want people to see the line. So I use a 40 weight thread.
Someone, Barbara had also asked, what is your machine of choice and do you control the length of your stitch or do you use a regulator?
No regulators in this room. No, I don't use a regulator. I don't use, I use Berninas because that's where I started back 30 years ago. And because the feet are most of the time interchangeable and I don't have to buy new equipment. I like the Bernina machines. They're getting a little too computerized for me these days. So I like the ones that are a little more chunky and able to be manipulated by me and not the computer.
Wonderful. Do you use a long arm at all?
I was really serious about buying a long arm about 10 years ago. So I went to one of those big conferences. I think it was in Dallas, and I tested every single long arm there was. But I had started by being on a desktop machine, on a tabletop machine, by sitting down and working and standing up and working, even though it was kind of a dance. I didn't have as much control and it wasn't as intimate for me. So I like the intimate quality of being right next to the stitch and right next to the needle. And with those long arms, you're kind of bent over, kind of, I don't know, it's just too big, too big.
Yeah.
So I'm staying with a desktop machine.
Mel had asked, why do you hate the term art quilt and how do you prefer to identify your artistic style or medium?
Have you ever heard of an art painting or an art sculpture?
Good
I
one.
have never heard that term, and I feel like it denigrates our medium. It denigrates our goal of being considered serious professional artists. Every time I say it, it trips through my mouth the wrong way. So I'm actually trying to, in some ways, walk away from the word quilt too, because so many people have connotations of their grandmother. I honor grandmothers, believe me, I am a grandmother myself, but I also feel like, getting on gallery walls is difficult when you're considered a blanket maker. It's very difficult. So
Most definitely. What brand of thread do you use?
I use a brand that's being discontinued and I'm so sad. I actually talked to the owner yesterday. I said, you can't do this to me and I'll buy all your stock. I use YLI thread, which is it's actually a thread from Japan. And it has very little lint and it's 40 weight, 3-ply. It's a great thread, and the original owner was bought out by this man who has it now, and they're trying to revive the brand, but they're not going to take that particular thread back into their line. So they're creating a new thread for me, and I'm hoping that their sample comes to me soon so I can recommend it. But in addition, I use Aurifil and Superior threads. Both are good quality threads. They're not as thick and not as lintless as the YLI.
Sure. Deborah had also asked us, changing the stitch length during the design process change the visual experience?
Interesting. Well, I don't pay attention to stitch length. Stitch length when you're free motion stitching is controlled by your gas pedal and your hands. So as you move the quilt through the needle, the faster you push on the gas and the slower you move, your stitch will be very tight. It's kind of like driving a manual stick transmission. You get the clutch right at the right place with the speed, and you go smoothly ahead. If you press too hard on the speed, you go zooming ahead, and your stitch length will change. So it's a balance of speed with your foot and how fast you move the quilt beneath the needle. So actually changing the stitch length makes no difference at all. And I actually use my free motion foot with my feed dogs up. Usually free motion stitching is done with feed dogs down. I find that with the feed dogs up, I have a little more control.
Okay, wonderful. Someone had asked, so what do you call our non-art quilts?
Art.
Art.
I have art. I make art.
Yep, absolutely.
I use stitch. I use stitch in art.
Stitch and art, yeah.
Yeah, I have this story that I went to an art show here in Memphis, and it was a juried show, and a young man won the top award in the show by the juror. And the statement under the word, it was a painting, and there was a machine stitch just across the horizon of the painting. And the statement from the juror was that this man had taken such a risk by stitching his painting. And that's why he thought that he should get the award. And I thought to myself, yeah, I guess we are taking a risk when we stitch. But we stitch a lot more than that, just one line across the middle. It's like we stitch a lot more. And I think we should get more credit for it. This is a skill as well as an art.
I agree. It's definitely. Diane had asked, thinking of the hands or animals, do you draw them before stitching?
I draw them on paper right before I actually do it on the quilt. If something's very specific that I really want to have on the quilt and I'm not confident with my first drawings, usually that hand-eye coordination between the pencil and the paper and the fabric and the stitch is pretty awesome. It works pretty well. They might not be exactly perfect, but I know, that the dog has a muzzle and a mouth, and I can put that dog in. But if I want a specific dog and I want it to be completely accurate, I will lightly pencil it in or use it on a tearaway stabilizer, and then put that on the quilt where I want it and stitch on the stabilizer and then pull that tearaway stuff out. So that's one option. But I very rarely do that because I'm just not patient enough to do the research and go get my stabilizer.
Okay, perfect.
I'd rather have a wonky dog.
There's been a few questions on whether MISA provides the sewing machines, and we do have sewing machines. You're always welcome to bring your own, or you can rent a sewing machine from us as well. So I wanted to address that. We do have people that are very connected to their own machines and they want to bring them, and they pack them up and bring them on their own. Someone was wondering if you ever teach this class online.
No, I'm not an online teacher. It's uncomfortable to me, and I actually I have to be right next to you when you're stitching. That's where I find the way that we can make it easy.
Becky had asked too, so she said, so you never mark your quilts before you stitch. I asked this because the quilt with the hands on it, and I wonder if that is you and the machine.
It could be, I guess. I'm not sure. Yeah, those hands came up. My son came over and was juggling, and I took a bunch of pictures of him juggling and the balls in the air, and I actually wanted to do something with hands. And so I looked at a lot of hand drawings that other people have done and how to do it, and came up with those are pretty simple hands. So once I got the hang of how to draw that, I just went straight to the stitch. But yeah, they could be my hands, but I see them as my sons.
Someone else was wondering, what do you do to keep your hands from cramping? And do you have any good relaxing moves for shoulders, arms?
Oh man,
There's
yeah,
so much sticking.
yeah, this is a dangerous art. Bad for your body. So I'm very conscious of that. And, I spent 30 years as a designer and I was always hunched over a table or in front of a computer. And, my back and neck and eyes suffered because of that for 30 years. And then I traded in and decided to be a quilter, which is just the same stress on my body. So sometimes actually have to suit up. I have a neck brace sometimes that I wear to make sure
Mhm.
that my neck is still straight when I'm working instead of bowing my neck, I have to move my whole body
Yeah.
forward. Shrugging my shoulders, stretching, getting my arms out and around. My chiropractor at one point said you need to get like an egg timer that'll go to 40 minutes, and every 40 minutes it goes off so that you stand up, turn around, look far away, look close, exercise so that your body keeps limber.
Yeah.
I'm not as good at that as I should be. So sometimes I hobble from my studio to my house.
Yeah.
And I pay for it. So,
Absolutely.
yeah. And my hands luckily are still strong. No cramping in the hands. Knock on Formica. It's
Yeah.
yeah, it's scary to lose your hands and have them cramp up like that.
Joan was wondering, for your larger pieces, do you work on smaller pieces and combine them later, or do you free motion on the entire thing after piecing?
Both. So earlier works, I was doing the whole quilt all at once because I wanted the story to go across all of the patchwork. And sometimes my studio is set up so that I have a number of tables behind my sewing machine, so the quilt can just sort of fall onto those tables and be supported. And that's really critical because if you start having it fall over your table or off to the side, the needle will pull and you won't have as much control. There's a number of ways of setting that up too with clamps from the ceiling, but mine is just a table solution. And now, I've done a number of collage work, so I'm actually cutting up old work, things that I'm tired of or that didn't work, cutting them up, restitching them, and stitching them back together in a collage form. So that's sort of an assemblage process. I think one of the ones that you had is like that red piece that you posted as the graphic for this class and webinar. Yeah, so those are, pieced, they're quilts that have already been made, cut up, restitched, re-put together, and then stitched over on top of that. So like
Um,
4 levels of stitching. Yeah.
oh, wow. Someone else was wondering, do you wear gloves to quilt?
Don't do it. It's too hot.
Yeah. Okay. Ellen was wondering, with your cartoonish characters, do you draw them ahead of time or sew them freehand?
A lot of my doodles end up with cartoons in them. I think that's because that's what I can draw.
Yeah.
If I could draw something more realistic, I probably would stitch that too.
Yeah.
But a lot of my characters have big mouths that are open because that's an easy thing to stitch.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Perfect. I think we'll do, are you okay to answer? The questions are coming in, maybe 10 more questions.
Sure,
Is that
sure.
good for
I
timing for
love
you?
I love questions. Thank you for
Okay,
questions.
good. Well, they keep coming. I, Bernina typically have a control for the pressure of the foot. Do you adjust this when you leave the feed dogs up?
No, I don't touch it.
Okay.
Sometimes if I'm working on a really fat piece, I will. Like I use some upholstery. I don't know what they call that stuff. It's upholstery. You make cushions out of it. And the batting between my canvas and the back fabric was about this thick, maybe an inch and a half thick. I had to change the pressure on the foot there. But most of the time, my Bernina, though it has too many computers on it, is a really good machine and can handle the stress that I put it through. I am definitely putting it through a lot of stress, but it's chugging along right now.
And what about machine needles? What do you use for the
I use a
machine?
9014 top stitch needle because it has a bigger hole, and it also allows for that 40 weight thread to go through without getting shredded. It's really strong needle. I can also use 116 thread top stitch needles for really heavy pieces. If I go back to cotton and I'm using a thinner substrate, I'll use a 12 or 14 standard stitch, machine quilting stitch needle.
Someone was wondering if your machine is in a cabinet or sitting on a tabletop.
Right on the top of the table. So when I come in, it beckons me, says, "Come here, come here."
Okay. Here I am. Kathy was wondering what your advice would be for someone who loves free motion but is intimidated by constantly stopping and starting in the doodles.
Mm. Um, find a way to knot them. I stop and start a lot nowadays because it's necessary. And so what I've been doing is when I get to the end of that stitch, I slow down really slow and do 2 or 3 little stitches in the same place and then clip the thread. These are not going in the washing machine. These are not being used by my grandson or the dog. They're not going to unravel if they have that extra 3 or 4 stitches on the ends. And it gives you a little bit of, there's a little bit more black or whatever color you're using. It's a little denser in that little spot, but I'm actually using it to my advantage and making them bigger sometimes because I like the spot.
Sure. And what about cleaning?
Cleaning.
Yeah,
I store my quilts in sheets. They're wrapped in or they're rolled into sheets, so they're dust free. When they're on the wall, I've had that quilt that started this discussion here, the one with the red squares on it. That's been hanging in my den for 15 years. It's doing fine, and every so often I take a vacuum cleaner to it with a really low setting.
sure.
Um, it's not very dusty. It's not losing its integrity. It's got enough stitching that it's strong. I'm told that I shouldn't have had it there so long, but it looks great to me. So I figure that it'll be there until I'm not.
Perfect. Um, are you inspired by nature's symmetry? How about squares and circles found in nature? How does geometry influence your art?
Oh, what a great question. Yep, I'm definitely inspired by all of that. And I've been studying a concept that was introduced to me about 3 months ago called um, dynamic symmetry. It's basically a diagram to organize your compositions. And so I'm looking at how trees grow and how weeds grow and how things emerge out of sidewalks and things like that, and how does that relate to geometric forms. Some of the stuff that I'm doing now with those ink blots are kind of superimposing the geometry of fractals or the geometry of dynamic symmetry, looking at some sacred geometry too, thinking about how those geometric forms can organize my composition, and also kind of delve into the mystery of nature because that's number one muse. If that's where I am in looking at things. I'm looking at nature. I read the news, I read science, I read novels, I read poetry, but nature has the answers. And so,
Absolutely. Along that line, Mel was wondering, do you listen to music, a podcast, TV, or anything while stitching, or do you prefer more of a quiet environment?
silencio. That's the word. Yeah. If I'm distracted, I couldn't do podcasts. I can't do novels because I'll lose track of what they're talking about. I'm so deep within the work. If I'm doing paperwork or cleaning up the studio, the music goes on, but not when I'm stitching.
Okay. We had an interesting question here, a request from Elizabeth, and I think we're all wondering the same thing. We look and we see your background of your studio and how gorgeous it is and all this art that you have just decorating every aspect of it. And she was wondering, she said, you're such a good role model, allowing us to be fearless. Your mother would be proud of you. She said, do you feel comfortable giving us a tour of your working space? Just wondering how you organize and place things. Also, what do you do with all your finished work, pieces you're not happy with? I'm familiar with your recycled quilt pieces, your herd.
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
that hurt. And then during COVID, I made I think 47 masks, full face mask. Here's one right here. It's like,
Oh, wow.
because I felt so isolated. Well, I don't know how I would do a tour, but this I can move my computer around. I'm at a computer desk in one side of my room, and right behind me is a tower of scraps. This These are scraps from my quilts that I cut off while I'm working, or, they just end up being kind of thrown away. And I didn't like throwing them away because it was a waste. So I started putting them together as garlands. And I'm having a show at the International Quilt Museum in next year. And they have a pillar in the middle of a gallery that I'm going to be in. And they said, do you have any ideas for this pillar? I said, I have just the thing for you. So we're making that pillar of scraps, so that they're going to put a hoop around the pillar and hang the scraps from the hoop. But you can see in the background there, the island of tables. It's a large island of tables that has my sewing machine at the very bottom. I'm not sure if you can still hear me, but can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay, good. I have a sewing machine here, right here, that actually is just a straight stitch machine. And then this is my main Bernina here. And then the tables are arranged behind, all behind it. And so that the quilt is supported at every stage. There's a fabric storage here. And then if I turn the computer, well, so I have these wonderful bins that my friend Nisha gave me, and I separated them out to various types. Here's a whole bin of large scraps, and then there's one of small scraps, and then there's one of stuffing, stuff that I can stuff things with. Then on the other wall is the design wall. So this one goes about 14 feet long. And they're movable. And so I can have various surfaces to work with. If I want to work on these pieces, I'll push that board aside and then create it. So that goes all the way down. And then there's a storage room in the back for the things that are too bulky to store. I store all my quilts in, I think there are 6 different places now.
Wow.
I'm gonna have to create a spreadsheet, like spare bedroom under the bed.
Oh
So
my gosh, what a treat to be able to
it's a it's a
see.
gr- you know it's a great studio. We bought this property because of this studio, and it's been just a wonderful place to work and be. So, and we're surrounded I can't really show you the outside, but the outside is a huge garden that my husband and I work on, that just, that's the therapy, the good stuff out there, all the green.
Definitely. I just wanted to, we're unfortunately that hour just flew by so
Yeah.
incredibly quick. I wanted to just end with some things that your students are saying about you. I love reading your journal entries, always interesting and thought-provoking. Pam said if you can take a class with Paula, she's a fabulous teacher. I learned a lot from her. Sharon loves your dress.
Thank you.
Yeah, someone else said I second that. She's an amazing teacher and the class is so valuable and fun. I'm a complete novice and I learned so much. Linda again said, so good as a beginner. What size do you recommend practicing on? A little question, that might be our last question. Do you have a certain size for beginners?
I always use 14 by 14 inch squares, and I usually have a pile of them next to my sewing machine. They're perfect size to do something in an hour or a 45-minute session. You can experiment to your heart's content, and then you end up with this wonderful piece of thing that could be cut up or turned into a mask or a purse or or part of a collage. And it's not a huge waste of fabric, and it's just really fun to have something that, oh, I finished something today.
Absolutely. Yeah, just a few more. I mean, work is lovely. You always have the best ideas. Thanks, Paula. Excellent talk. This will be a fun class.
God, you guys are so great.
Yeah, and I could go on and on. We're just, at the very end of all this, so you'll be able to look through some of these on your own. You're an inspirational lady, always inspiring, so excited. So, your work speaks for itself. People are so excited about what you're offering and your art that you offer to the world. Your workshop at MISA is coming up in August. It's August 26th through the 30th. If you have any questions at all, you can always reach out to any of us at madelineschool.com. You can reach out to Paula. She has her other workshops also listed on her website. Someone had asked where that was on your website. I think it's under your journal entry. Is that correct,
It
Paula?
is, and it doesn't show up when you look on on your phone. You have to scroll down pretty far to get it on your phone. But if you're on a computer, it's on the right-hand side of the journal page.
Well, like Connie said, her head is still swimming with all these ideas and thinking about it. So we hope that we'll see you guys either here on campus or the next place that we have you, Paula. And we really, really appreciate your time today. Again, this will be recorded. Paula, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Everyone else for joining us. I'm sorry if we didn't get to your question. There was a lot of great questions asked, and we'll look forward to seeing you just over a month.
Yeah, it's great.
Really.
I'm looking forward to it. What a perfect time to go to Lake Superior.
It's going to be wonderful. Yeah, we can hardly wait.
So I'm going to have to call my husband and ask him to enlarge the door because my head is too big.
Well, we appreciate your time. We so appreciate you sharing all of your art with us.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Take care. See you soon.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.